Thank you very much for coming to this conference, to this briefing. And we're happy to have among us President Luca Jaillet, who will start this meeting, giving us his welcoming in this house. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear President, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy to welcome you in this house. It is a double house. I am the President of the European Economic and Social Committee, and this house is shared between two committees that are the two consultative committees of the European Union, and this room is the room of the European Committee of the Region. So we share the same building with different rooms that are entitled to the two committees. So I am really happy to welcome you today at the EESC premises for this round table organized in partnership with by FAFCE and SALUX on the relationship between family and finance. The fact that the event title is drafted as a question, family and finance, a possible alliance, already shows that this connection is not yet obvious for all and should be made clearer. Today's discussion is based, for what I have read in your document, of two assumptions. First, the absence of a demographic policy to stop the population decline, and second, the role of the family as a productive economic unit. Since we are at the European Economic and Social Committee, the House of Civil Society in the European district of this Europe capital, let me share with you the way I see these two premises, also taking into account a position previously taken by our committee, and one also is a report that I drafted more than 10 years ago about the family issue. From the outset, I can already assure you that the EESC agreed with both of these premises. Concerning the demographic trend and these threats, regarding the decline of the EU population, this is indeed a development that can have grim consequences. Let me picture a scenario for you coming from one of our opinions drafted a few years ago. The title was "The Role of Family Policy in Relation to Demographic Change with a View to Sharing Best Practice Among Member States." This was an opinion asked at this time by the Hungarian presidency. I think it has been the last time that at the level of the Council the issue of family has been set as a priority as such, after there was the perspective towards European Years of Family, that after has become the proposal of European Year of Conciliation between family and work, and after was simply thrown out and left aside. In a scenario extrapolating forward from the current trends, the fertility rate in the EU would generally remain below the population replacement level. Due to the demographic inertia, the population would continue to grow slightly as a result of the increase in life expectancy and positive migration, although this is very, very much discussed today, or not accepted by a rising majority in our countries, but sooner or later this effect would ultimately recede. In this case, the European Union would experience both a significant population aging and a significant rise in the number of elderly people, also known as gerontogrowth. The combination of these two, despite the boost coming from migration and the higher but controversial retirement age, would lead to a decrease in the labor force. Always extrapolating from the current trends, around 50% of the EU countries would experience a decline of their population in the year to come. And this is a clear tendency already shown more than 20 years ago by some French demographers, and not absolutely listened by the politician in this time. But there is more, pushing this scenario to an extreme one, to what is called a catastrophe one, where the demographic winter would intensify, births would be considerably outnumbered by deaths. Such a considerably older society would no longer have the means to provide the financial and health support needed by its elderly people. Moreover, an aging European Union would affect its economy, which could result in an exodus of skilled young people to more entrepreneurial nations. And youth suffering from lack of dynamism would suffer from major budgetary problems, even more serious than today, and so face also serious difficulty in keeping its social security system already under pressure, not only by the financial and the state debt, but also by the lowering of the collecting of taxes and transfers. Do we want such a scenario for the EU in the year to come? I don't think so. What we want is a scenario of demographic renewal where the fertility rate can rise toward a full replacement rate. A scenario where the increased birth rate can stimulate various sectors of the economy and increase the labor force. In such a positive scenario, demographic dynamism would translate into economic dynamism, helping to finance also social security, although this issue is also an issue to be treated because also our welfare system, our welfare social contract has to be redefined, and not in the principle, not in the level of protection, but in the way this protection and these services are provided for giving a possibility to the principle to be applied. It's very simple. The system is changing, so we want a high level of protection, the highest in the world, but we need also to reflect on how this system provides this security to its population. Now the question is, of course, how to create this positive scenario. And I have to say that I will have no knowledge about the name and the work done by Vincenzo Bassi that I just met today, but the background of today's meeting prepared by Vincenzo Bassi gives us enough argument for defending the role of the family in this process. Mr. Bassi presented the family as a productive economic unit, and he puts the following: family represents the proto-enterprise, and it is not a coincidence that the word economics derives from the Greek words oikia, home, family, and vokos, discipline, management. In other words, economics means management of family at the very beginning of the creation of these two words in one word. However, before considering the family as a productive economic entity, we should see it as a unit capable of creating unity by nurturing the feelings of love and trust. So please allow me to emphasize that before being economic, the family is social. That is, it exists to create a bond among its members, and the social contract is, as always, the way to secure the economic capacity of creation. Not because before the social investor and after the economic growth, this dilemma of the usual bargaining between the employers and the trade unions, but because the social unit of a collectivity and the family at its beginning is the basis to make a secure possibility to invest. So without the trust, without the security, without the social contract, you cannot have a possibility of growth except speculation that can happen and go out, but not a security in the long term. So the family can be conceived as a social investment project in the medium and long term. In the Mr. Bassi abstract, we read that the family producing services for its own and its member act more than just as a consumption agent. Indeed, the family is also, they continue to quote, and above all, an employer of resources, including through investment, to carry out its standard function. I fully agree that the standard function of a family is not just to have children, but rather to be a cradle for them. No one is born in a vacuum, and family ties still rank highest of people's list of values. Why? Because of all the investment made in the family life and obtained in terms of affection, security, healthcare, care, socialization, education, accompanying also in the transition in life. And in this society where either is becoming elder society, and the other side, the entering in the labor market has become more fragmented with more interruption, the role of the family also in accompanying this transition has become more and more important also in terms of capacity of provide access to money where there is no other way to have money. This is very clear also in the using of savings of the older family to the young one. And as Mr. Bassi stresses, the more relations within a family are based on fraternity, the better are the services it provides and the more benefits for the community are generated. Indeed, in our contemporary society, although success is mainly defined in terms of individual professional terms, there are other forms of personal success, which are the way we connect with others and act for the common good. All the development of the theory of the common good, we know that in Italy we have many economies that are working on this, but also at large, all the growing of the social economy and the social enterprise all around Europe is a clear demonstration of the force of this other concept, where the person will realize themselves in a framework of a collective and cooperative and collaborative economy more than in a simple individual and competitive one. And this economy of the common goods include the family, the community, and the cultural life. In my view, this, as I can call, less material aspect requires far more attention. This takes me back to the term of investment. Families are communities that need to invest in themselves to thrive. The same needs to happen in society. To thrive, they need investment or better social investment. Why? Because I am an economist by education and also journalist for part of my life. And you know that there is a very rare and fragile resource that the economy needs, any type of economy. It is very fragile, very difficult to build, to secure, to maintain, and very easy to destroy. This is trust. The simple example I was given when I was a student at the university about the importance of trust in the economy is the following. You are a client that enters in a bar and you want a coffee. The barman has the coffee to provide to you and you have the money in your pocket. So there are two different traditions. In some cases you go, you pay the coffee, you have a ticket, and after you have the coffee. In other tradition, first you have the coffee and after you pay. But in both issues, if you do not trust the barman that he will give you the coffee after you have paid, you will have your euro in your pocket, but you will not pay. Because I will give you the euro and after I am sure that you will give me the coffee. Or I will need a policeman or a carabinieri going to Italy that accompany me to secure that after I have paid, I didn't get only the ticket, but I will have also the coffee. Or on the contrary, the barman will not deliver me the coffee if it doesn't trust that after I will not go out of the bar running and will not pay the euro. So in the very simple normal life, where there is this exchange, a euro against the coffee, trust is fundamental. Besides any form of rules. You can have rules, of course. You are obliged to pay your consumption. But you cannot provide security, control, and the policeman for every bar, for every consumer of coffee all around the world to secure or to go to denounce that the person has not paid his coffee for €1 because it will be simply impossible. So this is the fundamental law why trust is fundamental in the functioning of the economy. And trust is a non-material goods, but a fundamental non-material goods, and needs part of society that will build, secure, be a source of refurbishing continued this trust. And family is for sure one of these places. So even before thinking family, collectivity, association, intermediate corp, also rules, also the role of the rule of law, of course, but we need this system of trust. We need this ecosystem of rules, but also habits, and also organization of society that will provide this reproduction of trust and will repair also trust when it's destroyed by a failure, by an incident, or by a clash. Without this, not only there is no society, because there is the war of everyone against anyone, but there is no economy, there is no grout, there is no coffee, there is no martini, no party. One of our opinion on the subject, it was called the impact of social investment on employment and public budget, state that social investment has multiple positive effects. Let me specify with a quote from this opinion. Existing social needs are met, employment opportunities created, equal opportunities promoted, and rising employment and falling unemployment compensated for the cost to a great extent. So the social investment has to be considered perhaps in the short term as a cost, but in the medium long term as a clear investment because they provide all these positive consequences. However, in most cases, social investment produces a positive impact over time. For example, investment in childcare, early education, health promotion, working conditions adapted to different stages of life, and thus not immediate returns, and that's the problem to be worked more. Moreover, we all agree that even if social investment involves short-term cost, in the medium to long term, it brings welfare gain for society and higher revenue for state budget. Prevention is always lower than to intervene after the disaster, which can significantly reduce future costs. Here I would add that the same happens to families, which in my view are the first expression of social investment. The problem is that, and I quote here again Mr. Bassi, economic and financial institutions consider the family as a cost for the public budget, rather than a strategic asset for society. This is not new. If you come back in the 80s, when the debate about the environmental issue was rising, you can largely remember that at this time the environmental issue on constraint were considered by enterprise, by also the public debate as externalities. And so there was a problem to price these externalities, and the bargaining was for enterprise not to recognize too much externalities, but also for the worker organization, and for the other there was more minority to say, no, you have to pay because this externality will be a cost for future generations, you will have an impact. There has been an enormous change in the conception about environmental issue. And now came to the concept of sustainability, sustainable development. Not only we have considered that there was not only, you have to pay also because you pollute the environment, you cannot discharge this on the community. When you produce pollution, after is the state, through the taxation of all the citizens, they have to collect the pollution that you have created. No, the who create pollution has to pay for what he pollutes. But now we consider that either this impact the future, the climate change, the condition of our environment, and so is an obligation to take care of this because it's part of the future security. But even we have made a step forward that has changed radically the paradigm. We consider that the environmental challenge is becoming an asset and an opportunity. Look very simple to the green economy. Today, the green economy, the circular economy, the transformation in sustainable energy is not seen anymore as an externality of which to reduce the maximum the cost for the enterprise and to bargaining for the other who has to pay, not only as an obligation, as a constriction, but as an enormous opportunity to create enterprise, growth, businesses, good employment, and also future of our society. So the same step we have to rebuild for the family, and for the family investment, for the social investment, starting for this. Is not a cost, is a condition, and can become even an asset, as any investment is, and an enormous opportunity to reform, to revise, to rebuild, to reboost our growth in a different manner. In this sense, company should aim at improving living standard of individuals and family rather than adapting simply their business model to consumeristic logic. And I fully agree that the global financial crisis has shown that the consumption-based economy, not relying on social investment, makes society worse off by increasing indebtedness and decreasing savings. Hence, instead of merely focusing on family as consumer, it would be necessary to establish an economic and production system centered on families. That is a system able to respond to the needs of the family in the areas itself invests in: care and healthcare, security and socialization, education and lifelong learning. This sector can be an enormous source not only of investment but also of creation of opportunity of job, employment, and also good return in terms of growth. This type of investment shares the same main features of family. It focuses on sustainability, not only economic sustainability but also societal sustainability. That is even more important. While families want to be preserved over time, also investment is only worthy if it is sustainable. Put in other terms, since families plan their future over the long term, an appropriate long-term family policy is one of the components of sustainable growth. There is also another aspect that is absolutely important, because one of the reasons of the deep crisis where we are today is the fact that we have put out of the fundamental scenario of our main decision in the policy making the term of future. And to put back the term of future in our day-by-day decision in the policy making at the local level, but much more on the national level, we need driver of policy based on future that will lead us to the future, not only fix us in the present. This could be the reflection of infrastructure. Anyone who works on the future of infrastructure knows that you cannot base your choice only on the present, but you have to look, because to invest in infrastructure need study, research, and after investment, where the result you will have in 10, 15 years. The same is about the technological change. The technological need a reflection to the future. And the family, for their structure, are based on looking to the future. Although it's absolutely uncertain, but the family, when has also kids, need to plan the future. For a fundamental need, also without a culture of future, need to plan the future. It's a necessity. And so will help this rebalancing that is fundamental also for society and the economy to come back to a logic based on the future and not only on the short term, where we have based a lot of our economics way of managing savings of organized society only in the short term. We need to re-put the category of the future in the core of our decision-making process and to make this accepted by our population and by our stakeholders. And putting family at the core of the decision can help also this process, beside the help of the family, as important as they are. For sure, economic growth cannot be achieved only through family. That's sure. It's not the family will solve everything. But growth itself cannot be achieved without supporting also the family and this role as driving one of the driving force of the system. This is the whole program of social investment. Social investment is about investing in the immaterial wealth of society with the main aim of achieving a social return. Well, that is exactly the role of the family towards its descendant, investing in them for free. By investing in the human capital, family is an irrepressible form of social capital and should receive recognition for the way it cares its people and takes care of them at every stage of their life. The family should be properly supported and encouraged in its social and economic role. An appropriate long-term family policy is thus clearly one component of sustainable development. And going to an end, and concerning the role of the European Union, you all know that family policy is not an EU competence as such. But although there are provisions in the EU Treaty and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights which protect the family, In terms of policy, the EU is able to enact legislation in areas which have an important impact on family life. For instance, a proposal for a directive on work-life balance for parents and careers is currently being discussed in the highest level, although we know that it's still far from what should be necessary, and although that under the Austrian presidency there are still many difficulties, not from the Austrian but other member states, even to accept this low level of legislation that has been proposed, but this is also the way Europe works, step by step, sometimes with a long fatigue. But further action must also be taken in other key areas, such as gender equality at work and in the home, child protection, fight against family and child poverty, and so on. This measure can be taken in the framework of the European policy and also in the next European multi-annual financial framework. And this measure must be based on a combination of taxation measure and child and family benefits. I remember all the debate, unfortunately, was left aside by the French presidency about the revision of the TVA directive, that was a possibility to make a direct intervention in this field, a clear possibility in the end of the European level, but unfortunately France has preferred at this time to revise the TVA directive for the restaurant and not for the families. We remember this very clearly, and we have to say that Mr. Sarkozy has not gained so much for this choice, because finally the restaurant has not voted for him in the election, although he revised the directive exactly putting the 4% of TVA for the restaurant, that was lefting aside the other proposal that was 4% for the goods, for the kids and for the family, and a certain list of goods. So there are a lot of other issue of measures that can be taken, and of course an effort should be rebuilt on this, and I am more than sure that you will put this element at the core of our attention, and also my compliment for your work and good luck for the prosecution of your conference. Thank you for your attention.
Very many thanks, Mr. President, for your...
Vous pouvez parler français, je le comprends parfaitement.
Oui, je sais. Alors, un grand merci pour vos mots très, très forts et très puissants. C'est pas n'importe qui nous parle, c'est le président du Comité économique et social européen. Et je pense que ces mots très forts vont nous réjouir. Peut-être alors juste une petite chose, puisque vous avez fait allusion aux Français. Certainement, les restaurateurs n'ont pas voté M. Sarkozy, mais je ne crois pas que les familles aient voté M. Hollande. Ou alors il s'était drôlement trompé. En tout cas, je remarque le soutien très fort que vous-même et votre organisation êtes prêts à donner dans cette évolution nécessaire de la construction européenne. Beaucoup de gens disent qu'il faut mettre
European construction. Many people say we need to put people at the core of our political reflection. We would like to focus not only on human beings, people, but rather on human beings and their family. I think that human beings and their family have to be at the core of our reflection, and this is a reflection that we have to convey to the European Union political leaders in view of the elections that will take place in May. Thank you very much for your kind words and your attendance, President.
After these inspiring words from the President of the European Economic Social Committee, we just want to give the framework of this conference, of this meeting, which is really at the basis of an European project that we are starting since during the last year, with the cooperation of our members in Romania, the Vladimir Kika Catholic Family Association, with the Forum delle Famiglie, our major Italian member, and the SALUX Foundation. Maybe Jonas de Jong, its director, is here. We also want to welcome, now that the president has left, but we still have a member of this house, Mrs. Kinga Yo, who will take part in the round table afterwards. And we really thank you all for coming at this meeting. I think that we really had very inspiring words. The President started mentioning this opinion of the European Economic and Social Committee on family and demographic change. It's an opinion from 2007, but we have to say that this is still a source of inspiration for our work, and that's until now the only European Union document which is talking about family mainstreaming. And we are continuing proposing this family mainstreaming to all the institutions. I think this work today, it's a starting point also to propose and to be concrete in our action here before the European institutions. With these words, I would like to invite Professor Paul Dembinski to come and to give us his viewpoint regarding also the document we are presenting today. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much for this invitation and the possibility to share with this distinguished audience some of reflections about the relationship between economic thinking and family, and also economy as activity, human activity, and family. I used to be an economist, and maybe I moved to social economy or social philosophy, since I'm not a specialist on families from the economic perspective, but nevertheless for many years I also the president of the International Association for Social Christian Teaching, where we had the opportunity to discuss some of these issues, and that my remarks are based on some readings and some, let's say, first-hand experience, but it's not fundamentally purely academic remarks. So the first point, I think, has already been raised by the President Jaillet when he referred to the etymological foundations, let's say, roots of the term economy, the oikos, the household, of course, the extended household, not the household as you know it today. The economics is thus traditionally seen as the governance, the management of this unit of where goods and services are produced reciprocally for common use and for the use of family members. I think this is important because it's only progressively, if we look at history, that this focus of economy moved from household to the market, to the state, to, let's say, political economy, if it exists as it exists today. I think there is another observation which is shared by many of us, that and comes from everyday experience, that we look at economy as through national accounts, through activities that are generating value added. We look at families as economists, as producers. We look at them as providers of labor, as providers of capital, and also as consumers. But I think our experience shows, daily experience, that most of the decisions we have been taking in our life, most of us probably, are taken for the sake of the family, or as looking into the interest of the family, more or less clearly understood, and were not purely individualistic decisions. And this is, I think, very important to recognize that in real life, for only few decisions are acts by a lonely individual, what economists call homo economicus. The egoist, the coldly rational self, which economic models consider as being the expression of the ultimate human nature. And I think this is very important to look a little bit of what is happening within most of economic models, is that they are built on an anthropological assumption, and this anthropological assumption has a history, of course. it's usually called as Homo economicus. And maybe I will just open a small bracket of history of economic thought. When Pareto, one of the first professor of political economy in Switzerland, crafted this world or the theory of Homo economicus, he writes very clearly saying, well, life is human being is extremely complex. So I need to take out, for my purpose of the economist, of the human reality, I need to take out the slice that corresponds to economic activity, and then I will analyze it. And that's the utility function in different functions and all this. But then he says, Pareto, that once we have analyzed this slice, we have to put it back into the whole complexity of humanity, where in this complexity the Homo economicus interacts with Homo familiaris, with Homo ethicus, with Homo politicus, etc., etc., etc. So what happened to most of the economic thinking, especially most of the mainstream theory, that the work has stopped halfway because the Homo economicus slice was taken out of the human being and considered as being the whole-fledged human nature, which is still mainly taught in many universities. So I think it's important to, even in the very early 20th century, Pareto was aware of the fact that he is distorting reality for the purpose of analytical purposes, but the plug-in work needs to be done in order to have a full-fledged thinking about humanity. He was not referring to family, he was speaking about humanity. So, in consequence, because of the prevalence of Homo economicus, family is absent from economic theory, except one major, of course, but one contribution, which is one of Gary Becker. In 1981, he published Treatise on Family, and in 1992, he was awarded for the whole of his work the Nobel Prize. When he was speaking at the ceremony of Nobel Prize, he was using this sentence describing his work. This analysis assumes that individuals maximize welfare as they conceived it, whether they be selfish, altruistic, loyal, spiteful, or masochistic. So individuals maximize their welfare. That was the starting point of his work on families. So the only work on economics of family that is still, well, present, or school, is the one that stems from the work of Becker. Becker, I will refer to a new trend that is emerging in a few minutes. And this approach has very little to do with the perception of family as a value-adding unit. It is looked as being, and here I quote Becker again, the analysis of fertility has a long and honorable history in economics, he wrote in 1981, but until recent years, marriage and divorce and the relations between husband, wives, parents and children has been largely neglected by economists. The point of departure of my work, says Becker, on the family is the assumption that when man and woman decide to marry or to have children or divorce, they attempt to maximize their individual utility, comparing benefits and costs. So, in this highly reductionist approach, adults take decisions and the children are just the outcome of the product of this decision. In this perspective, family is at best a contemporary configuration with all possibilities of opting in or opting out, a kind of fluid family if we use the Bauman well-known, or liquid family if we use Baumanian terminology. So the permanently updated analysis of costs and benefits may lead to different kind of decisions. Let me quote now in contrast what the Compendium of Social Doctrine of the Catholic Church says when he speaks, the family is a divine institution that stands at the foundation of life of human person as the prototype of every social order. The family as a community of persons is thus the first human society. So we are exactly at the opposite. From this perspective, a Christian perspective, I guess, more than just purely Catholic and probably a human perspective, we are far away from this purely utilitarian and individualistic view of family as a fluid relationship between members. As the President has said before, there is no possibility, and the small document produced for this meeting tries to substantiate it. No society can function properly in the long run, and the investment discussion in the President's speech was very, very important. This cannot function in the long run without stable and effectively working families. And this is exactly the point which is important to be made. There is a complementarity between economics, or economic life to be precise, and families. So I leave the theory, move now for a while to real life. Families are not only producers of human capital, but they are also producers of goods and services, providers of care, regenerators of energy, essential for any productive activity. Indeed, most of the production and daily update of human capital is taking place outside of the formal economic area, in the shade of economic activity, in the shade of national accounts. This means that all these efforts are taken for granted. They're taken as a kind of windfall benefits by economic activity, by the market activity, by the formal economic activity. And that considered, and that was the reference also in President Jaye's speech, the parallel to ecology, they are taken as being there forever, as the ecology was perceived until the 70s or early 80s. So the social fabric is there, and we don't need to care about it because it will be always supportive of economic life. And I think today, economic society, European societies start to discover the size of long-term damage that is the outcome of weakening of families. We see it for sure on public finances. We see it probably on economic growth, and of course on human. We'll not speak about human dimension of it. So the point here is not so much to assess how much money it takes to raise a child, or how much money it takes to take care of the final years of an elderly person, but to accept that there is no alternative for families as productive units of specific goods and services. And let's call it the specific factor of production that is part of family, that only family can deliver, is caring love. Let's call it this way. And this caring love is the absolutely indispensable input into any kind of productive activity related to education, to caring, to taking care of elderly persons. So here I have to mention a book that has been published together by SALUX and EESC, the International Association for Christian Social Teaching, by a friend of ours, Professor Lubomir Mchok, who is a Czech professor. And in his book, which is called Economics of Family, and I think it will be some advertisement will be made about this book in a few minutes, Lubomir stresses the point that there is a specific production function, speaking in the language of economists, there is a specific production function that is characteristic to family as economic unit. This caring love is unique without any kind of possible substitute factor of production. Without this factor, the mentioned activities as caring, etc., will not be properly performed, and they will, by their absence, they will set grounds for problems to come. Only the family is able to generate this specific factor of production. This means that any economic-like calculation of costs or incomes or receipts in monetary terms can be only referred to very poor and material substitute to it. It's not a full-fledged substitute. So, humanly speaking, there is no substitute for it. This caring love as a factor of production is embedded in societies. It provides it based on gift, on reciprocity, on relationships, etc., etc., etc. And I think times has come for economists, but also statisticians, to acknowledge this uniqueness and try to care about it, and care about it as we started to care in the 70s about measuring the environment, to measure the damagement to the environment, and also to measure the contribution on the environment to the economic activity. So there is a huge parallel to be made between environment, I think, and this caring love that is about to disappear in our societies. So what Mulchok says, and I think it's very interesting, he says, yes, but this family sphere with this caring love and economic life are not two spheres that are living apart. They are in competition. They are in competition for what? They are in competition for time and for energy. So today the trend towards individualism is affecting through the micro decisions of our population and the younger and older generations, is affecting more and more energy and time to the market activity as opposed to, let's say, the family activity in terms of productive unit, as a productive unit. And this is driving us to the dangers that I mentioned before. And the first danger is, of course, the explosion of social budgets. And these budgets have to be paid somehow. The substitute through market mechanism or through social policy is a very imperfect substitute, but is nevertheless the only one that can be imagined in the present state. So I think the policy conclusion is very clear that the para-economic role of the family has to be acknowledged, to be socially rewarded also from the tax perspective. So let me move to a few elements of what I would suggest to be the next steps or the steps in which we should move. First step, and it's a pity that President is not here because I would like to hear his reaction to it, is the question of developing a proper metrics for measuring this activity of families, not putting a price tag on it and saying that 1 hour at home means 100 euros or 15 euros, because there is no substitute. So we should not use a monetary unit. We should find another methodology. That's another discussion. But we should really make an effort to quantify this input, as we have tried to quantify the ecological input into our everyday life. So it is a long-term work, but I think this kind of institution is where initiatives in these dimensions or in this direction should be taken. The point is, I think in present political debate, we all know that if there is no figures, if there is no data, the problem does not exist. So in order to give weight to these philosophical arguments that I sketched in the first remarks, we have to provide hard data. And these data are there, but data. The reality is there. We have to find the adequate way of measuring. There is a quote I often use, which is to say, if we measure something, it gets perverted, but if we don't measure it, it gets forgotten. So I think we should not allow that this aspect of social fabric, essential aspect of social fabric, gets forgotten. So we need to work on the evidence, not something that will be part of GDP accounts, something that will be outside of GDP accounts, saying, well, look, GDP grows, but this activity within the family decreases. So there is a cost, or there is a cost that has the GDP growth. If we take one example, which is a common day example, which is a family meal, and many of us probably have been hesitating, do we go to the restaurant or do we have a meal at home? Of course, if we go to a restaurant with our children, grandchildren, and so on, it will be a contribution to GDP. It will be a contribution to GDP. Of course, if we do it at home, the contribution to GDP will be smaller. But if we look from the growth perspective, everybody should go to the restaurant, and that's wonderful. But when moving from a family dinner to the restaurant, did we really change the utility of society? Are we better fed being there at the restaurant or being at home? Well, time to time it might happen, but not fundamentally. Not fundamentally. So much, that's my hypothesis, that much of our growth recorded in GDP figures was an effect of transfer, of activities that were taking place within household, not recorded except the price of carrots, if we take a family soup, so not recorded in statistics. When we moved it to restaurant, wow, GDP growth. But in fact, nothing has been added. Accounting, there is one accounting shift. So one has really to measure what's happening within households in order to see and to be able to identify which is empty growth, economically speaking, and which is the growth with content. So this is the statistic point, I think, is important because it's a long-term story. There is another point, probably, which is more legal, to think about, and we had some exchanges with people around this round table, to invent maybe a legal form, voluntary legal form, in which some families, especially looking at multi-generation family, where the three generation or even 4 generation time to time, can link up in a specific, let's say, agreement to do things together, to maybe pool resources together, to produce goods and services in the long-term perspective. It's a legal element, as cooperatives have been, and the joint stock company are also forms of human activity that have been invented at some stage to help develop them. And the last point, I think, and we are maybe at the first steps of it, because Nicolas referred to a process and project, European project, I think it would be very important to accompany at least the statistical effort by a kind of pulling together brains from all European countries, from academia, but not only from academia, in order to set ground for really a research project on the issues of economic role of families, not only as producers of children, not only as providers of labor, not only as consumers of whatever goods it might be, but as per se economic actors which have a fundamental role in supporting and maybe time to time in correcting the working of the individualistic market economy. This is, I think, the sense, the initial sense of the soziale Marktwirtschaft. When the soziale Marktwirtschaft was articulated, the social fabric was very strong. So I think, and based on some readings, that the authors or the fathers or the parents of soziale Marktwirtschaft had the idea that this fabric will be here forever. So, and today soziale Marktwirtschaft has a major problem because this fabric, family fabric that was taking so much effort and so much providing so much contribution to the soziale Marktwirtschaft is evaporating. So we have to do not so much with the soziale Marktwirtschaft, but individuelle Marktwirtschaft. And we still use the word soziale, but it's not soziale is for the fathers was not just redistribution by budgets. It was about fabric. It was about bonds. And of course, for the excluded, there was the social policy, but the core was somewhere else. So we have to probably to reconsider or to revisit the soziale Marktwirtschaft idea in the light of what's happening today. We see that very, very little is left. So thank you very much for your attention, and once again, thank you very much for your invitation.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Demiski. We'll have the time now to speak after a short break to give different reactions. But as I was telling, this event is co-organized not only by FAFCE but with the SALUX Foundation. We wanted to ask Johannes de Jong, director of SALUX Foundation, to take the floor for a moment.
First of all, my thanks to FAFCE for all the hard organizing work, and especially to you personally for all the work you did in organizing this and creating this, and to Mr. Antoine Renard for his contribution to the whole process. And thank you for coming today, for taking the time to be here, because we all know that, as we just heard, that the time is one of the essential thing that is in the competitive element between caring, love, and production. And here we're just taking time to reflect on that. And I'm happy with not just that we have this event, that we reflect on this, but also reflect from this from the right perspective. We don't go back to a family of the past. And I think it's good that we explicitly say, look, the past is the past. We're not heading back to that. We're not a nostalgia effort. We're not going back to the paternalistic past. I think it's important that we show that we're part of the future. And to close this for now and to head to something very important, the perspective of a world without coffee in the future. I think this might be something that all policymakers may come to reflect on very hard. And with that, I hope that there is actually coffee right after this. And I'm looking forward to that and to the rest of this conference. Thank you.